Welcome to Hidden History, Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co-host, Ray Smith. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Keith. How are you today?
I'm doing good. We've got a group from Oak Ridge that are with
Oh,
us today.
yes.
So why don't you introduce our guests?
Thank you. I'll be glad to. Mark Buckner and I have been talking about this for a few weeks now, as he's made progress on a project that got started. Oh, I don't know, Mark, a year or so ago now. Time flies.
Yeah, it
But
does.
I asked him if he would come on and talk about Giants of Oak Ridge and other things that he's doing at the Oak Ridge uh, Wildcat Manufacturing. And he agreed, but he also said, I'd like to have some support. So he's brought a couple of people with him, which I'm really glad that you all are here. Both of you are good friends, and we go back a ways. Uh, Holly and I go back further probably than Mark and me. And Joe, you and I started back when we introduced the idea of comparing the Manhattan Project to artificial intelligence and
Yes.
whether or not we were going to be able to use the good and ignore the bad. And
Well, that topic is not slowed down, by the way. So
I bet it's not. That was back when the Oppenheimer movie was coming out. We showed another documentary film there. I think After Trinity was, if I believe right, was the
that's
name of it.
correct.
But I thought it was a real interesting interaction with the high school kids. They understood artificial intelligence much better than I did at that time, and well, they still do today. I'm having more fun with it than I was back then, but that was a good way to start. You know what? That Oppenheimer movie actually doubled the tourism in Oak Ridge,
Wow.
and Oak Ridge is only mentioned twice
Right.
in the movie. But at any rate, the idea for Giants of Oak Ridge. Mark, uh, tell us anything you want to about the Wildcat manufacturing, but focus a little bit on how we got to the idea of the Giants of Oak Ridge, would you?
Mark, why don't you introduce our other two
Oh
panelists?
yeah, please.
Yes, I absolutely will. First, I'm gonna pass the baton to them and let them talk a little bit about their background. And Ray, I think it's relevant to the intersection of what we're doing is their roles and how all of this is coming together to support opportunities for our students and for our region and for beyond. And so the two other guests we have are Dr. Holly Cross and Joe Fothery. And instead of me muddling their introductions, I'm going to let them introduce themselves and speak to kind of the power of this collaboration and the vision that they have for it. And then we can deep dive as far as you want to go into the Giants of Oak Ridge and how it intersects with the other programs that we're growing. Holly, would you take it first?
Absolutely. So, Dr. Buckner and I go back until our kids were babies, but professionally, we go back to the classroom where first of all, he is a father of three first robotics students. And so they were a power family who spent evenings, days, nights, long months at the school together preparing world competitions. In addition to that, he was working with us with Roane State as an adjunct professor. He had a classroom across the hall from my office, so we got to talk a lot. And he always had these brilliant ideas of how we could make school better. So then he went on he was working at ORNL at that time when they gave him a release to come to us every day. So he was also sort of an industry partner with us. And then he went to work for Scrum Inc. as a consultant and garnered some additional skills there that he got to bring back to the classroom. So now we're just kind of weaving all the wonderfulness of Mark's history into a classroom situation where students are learning how to do all of the kind of mechatronics of robotics, in addition to this wonderful Giants of Oak Ridge partnership, working with ORNL to get new equipment and donations. The connections that he has in the community have really opened up our doors so more people are asking not just about his program, but about our other programs in Oak Ridge as well. So we're just trying to make school the best it can possibly be, and we owe a great debt to Dr. Buckner for helping us do that.
Good.
Joe, yeah, jump in, Joe.
Yeah. So, Ray, Keith, this is my 36th year in public education. I tell people this is what Methuselah does look like. I just put a lot of oil of Olay in those crevasses and it just shapes right up. I ran for many years one of the world's leading STEM labs, got a very large global network of people I work with. Had an opportunity to come to Oak Ridge and lead their innovation effort right now and get a chance to work with great people like Mark and Holly. And Mark's program is, I tell people, and I don't think I'm very far off base on this, I believe it's the most advanced manufacturing program for secondary students in the world. And so it's a lot of fun just to be able to work with Holly. She's a tremendous CTE director, and she really understands what has to take place to make things happen, make the lights turn on every day, and get kids in the programs and do things. And that gives Mark and I a chance to be able to dream and look at partnerships and just how far can we push the bubble on this. And going back just a little bit to the AI piece, I do a lot on that globally, and Mark does as well. And just trying to prepare our kids for this emerging skill set that they're going to have in the future of work and advanced manufacturing, and just learning how to live alongside of it. I think that's one of the things, we get so caught up in trying to get the kids ready for work that we don't want to forget, how do we help them learn how to live and to learn to live successful and productive lives. And we go back to, where you and I met, on the stage about the Manhattan Project, we stand on the shoulders of giants like those people. And it's not necessarily all a new set of things: hard work, creativity, persistence, willing to overcome failure. All those things take place in Mark's class every day. And so it's a lot of fun to go in there and watch this. And I've just been, to close on this, so excited to see this concept of the Giants of Oak Ridge come to life. I do a lot of speaking around the country, and I was out 4 days last week, and every one of them had a Mark Buckner feature in it about where the kids are going and what they're trying to do.
That's so as you can see, Ray and Keith, this partnership and this collaboration, it's not one person alone. Couldn't happen. And I'll springboard into the Giants of Oak Ridge, pulling on a couple of threads from both Joe and Holly. Joe talks about the giants, that we stand on the shoulders of giants, that if we're doing anything well, it's because that we've been able to build upon their history, their legacy, and to take it further and to pass the torch of the vision. And so in Oak Ridge, one of the things we talked about for quite a while is you used to think about coming to Oak Ridge to learn about history. Now, one of the things that we want to flip that and say, we want you now to come and learn how to make history. And so in the making of history is this rapid accelerated convergence of emerging technologies with the ethical and humane use and application of it, but connecting it strongly to our roots and our legacy to create a future that we're proud of, and our future generations can be proud of. And part of my fire is reignited because I just recently, as in a little bit over a year ago, now I'm in the grandpappy category. So I'm thinking about my granddaughter, and our kids beyond that. So that's a huge part of it. The other was, Holly mentioned our ability to launch this program because of a Department of Education grant. And that grant was really around how would you reimagine education, and specifically an innovative high school model. And so what we did is we took a lot of the threads that we've been kind of riffing over for years on what is the best we could think of in collaborative work and real world work, engaging curious learners. We talk about creating an innovator's mindset. Well, this brings everything we talk about in education from Oak Ridge and around of, the 4 C's of being creative and collaborative, be able to communicate, be critical thinkers. Well, we're wanting to bring all of that together with cutting edge technology and to prepare our students for the future. One of the things that we're seeing is technology is accelerating. The AI we're working with now is the dumbest it's ever going to be. The automation and technology is doubling down exponentially. And so how do we launch students into a world that is changing so fast that their biggest challenge is going to be reinventing themselves time and time again. Because, the day, Keith, Ray, when we thought we could enter into a career and we would just be doing that thing for the rest of our life, productive and challenging is pretty much gone. You're both storytellers and you're continuing to tell stories, but you're using new technologies to tell stories. So you're perfect examples of that kind of mindset. So that's really what we want to try to create as a foundation for our kids, and for all learners, right? Where we're working now is we really see a vision of the future of not only accelerating new learners into the world of work, but also positioning ourselves to help existing workers reconnect to that upskill, new skill, reskill kind of a thing. So that's
Well, Mark, with that said, you for years when you were a student, you came to school and you learned what the teacher gave you. Yeah. And it was all stacked out in this curriculum or the textbook series and, all these things, Holly and you and I've lived this and I guess Ray and Keith, you are byproducts of this because this is how we were taught. And today, the number one thing we're looking at is one of the most important things is how do we teach kids how to learn? And that's a new concept. It's not necessarily teacher giving you this. It may start with a problem a teacher gives. They may start with a problem that we collaborate on. But at the end of the day, how are you taking this massive resource base that you're trying to accumulate? And it may be the kids going out and accumulating the resources to identify the problem. But that's a totally different mindset than what we've had in traditional education. And if you walk in Mark's lab, it's one of the things I really appreciate about it. And I know Holly fosters this across the spectrum in the CTE program, is that you're seeing kids take on very challenging problems that don't necessarily have an easy answer that they've got to solve. And that failure doesn't mean it's not the F on the paper that we all dreaded with the red marker. It's just a part of the process. And now we've got to figure out how do we collaborate and overcome failure to move forward on things.
Yeah. And I'll springboard off of that. But Holly, I saw your lips moving. It sounded like you wanted to. I didn't hear your lips. I saw them.
You saw me nodding. A perfect segue with Joe, and people have heard me say this. I had this dream one night that I was supposed to elaborate on the fourth dimension of CTE, and I didn't even know if that was a thing. So when I woke up, I looked it up, and it's just exactly what you're just saying, Joe. It's of course, the first three dimensions are like academic and technical skills in those 4 C's. And the fourth dimension is actually learning how to learn. So that is an actual concept out there in CTE learning, but it's true for every kind of learning. To learn how to learn was like my philosophy of education as a baby teacher as well, because the kids are going to leave you. So what are you giving them? The tools to be enthusiastic, inspired learners beyond your walls.
And Ray, this may be something we can pull later on because I really want to get to the Giants of Oak Ridge because that's kind of what this is about. But I think we've all recognized this new challenge, and I'm going to point to this, and we can come back later on. I've had the opportunity to speak, did a keynote presentation on the future of workforce development and the critical challenges we're facing at the International Consortium for the Digital Twins. I had a chance at the Friends of ORHS and ETech, and I'm going to get a chance to go to talk at the Innovation Convention in Blacksburg and Roanoke. They're looking at that for innovation industrial base. And so one of the things we laid out are the challenges, the crises that we're facing in learning. And we can talk about those later on, but I think what we're about to discuss is we believe are the keys to addressing those crises and turning problems into opportunities. And, how do we engage our students into work that is, around mastery, autonomy, and purpose? Taking the best we know of neuroscience and what we call it's a spiral scaffolding of the Secchi model, in realizing we have both explicit and tacit knowledge, and it's not linear. It really is nonlinear and integrated, so that we're really creating adaptive and agile learners, able to thrive in the world that we're about to move into, and we're moving into with great speed. And one of the things we boot up in this, and I'll pause, is there's been some great work done by folks that studied the innovation culture around Toyota and their success. And one of the beautiful things we love is they view their work as a socio-technical union, right? It's technology and people thriving together, producing value of beautiful products that are of great value, but also moving technology very, very rapidly. And so we're actually adopting in the classroom something that's called the scientific thinking kata. A kata is a practice that you use until it's no longer something you got to think about consciously. If you're learning to play an instrument or do anything else, it's booting up those fundamental skills. But the critical piece of this is we're navigating through our learning and our life more with a compass than a map. So instead of laying out these milestones we thought we had when we taught linearly, it's basically saying we've got a big goal out here we're trying to get to. We got to figure out where we are now. Where are we? What do we know? What can we do? And then what's a target out there just a little bit further we're working towards? That's our next target condition. And then what are the experiments? To Joe's point, what are we going to do? What do we think we're going to experience when we do those things? And then you look at your experience and we realize, okay, it's what we did, what we expected. And that's I think of it, it's not failure, but we talk about it as failure. It's different, right? What we experienced is different than what we expected. And then comes the really fun part of why. And that's where learning unfolds. And so giving our kids this opportunity to continue to iterate on their learning, their application is going to set them up to move from, mindset, values, principles, and practices to be able to do that. So I'll pause and let you all dig in, and then we'll actually talk about the Giants of Oak Ridge.
Yeah, we'll we'll get to that, but I had to think, Keith, as you know, we have a diverse audience that watches our program, and you don't always have, and we sometimes have this struggle. So the struggle being in Oak Ridge, we tend to talk in acronyms, and sometimes our audience won't get that. A very good example is we've mentioned today several times the term CT. Holly, what does that stand for?
It's career and technical education.
Career and technical education is exactly what we're talking about. Now, Mark, let me remind you about Toyota just a little bit.
Yeah.
And Keith, I won't tell a long story, but let me tell a quick one. Dr. Deming's philosophy of statistical process control was introduced into Y12 when I was there. And one of the ways we introduced that concept was by looking at the Japanese idea of quality circles. Now, that's an early innovation of just what you're talking about, getting the people involved, solving problems, coming up with new ideas, implementing those ideas. We put them into Y12 and called them pride circles. And that it's that kind of innovation that allows the workers to contribute to the process, to contribute improvements. And that's what you're doing in education. You're not calling it quality circles. I understand that, but you're getting the kids engaged in problem solving and in learning how to learn. And I think that is just so exciting to see you. And let's talk a little before we go to Giants. Explain to folks what iSchool is. Would you do that?
Sure. I'll try to keep it succinct, and Holly, you can help do that. So iSchool was a collaborative, jam session that Holly and I have been talking about for years. This really I'd had the privilege, and I consider it a privilege, to be able to come into Oak Ridge High School and teach dual enrollment for a number of years. I was a first period class. I had the lab give me liberty to come and teach. And I was still working with kids at night in FIRST robotics, but Holly and I were saying, how can we open this up to more opportunities for more students? Well, one way to do it is to embed it in the schools and opportunity. And so we got to do industrial Internet of Things. And no place in the world was teaching that. And we were, kids, integrated robotics, AI, all of these in digital engineering before it was called that, which was a blast. And so, Holly and I would continue to talk about how could we do that? How could we take this model you're talking about, Ray, and expand it to more students? Because we really believe it's a mindset and it's an ability, and it's not really linked to a specific career. It's a key and a set of tools that are going to launch you to generate value in any career. So that's why we saw it as foundational. And so after consulting for a number of years, and I'll mention this, Ray, and you guys can cut it out if you want to. I was hired to go into companies and to boot up innovation teams with the Deming mindset. Now, they didn't call it that, what I learned in my collaboration at Scrum Inc. So I worked very closely with the owner, Jeff Sutherland,
Right.
and they had started a collaboration in Toyota with the descendants of the original Toyota production system in Toyota City to recreate the Scrum of the grandfathers. This is Deming. Deming is the grandfather of lean and agile.
Yes.
In lean, it became quality circles and agility. This now is a reintegration of that mindset for a learning innovative ecosystem of what it was. And so we were doing a study. One of the things that we found when we went into organizations, these are existing companies, and trying to help them be more innovative, be more like you just mentioned, Ray. The mindset was the biggest challenge. It wasn't technical, right? And so one of the things we found, there's a number of surveys, and I could share these with you, looking at the state of disengagement in the workplace. Now, this was pre-COVID,
Yeah.
right? So disengagement, and what they found statistically was there was only about 30% of employees that were actively engaged in work. That meant they brought the best in themselves, their creativity, their mindset, their problem-solving skills. Their vision of the future aligned with the vision, future, and mission of the company, and they were really driving value. There was another larger than 30% swath that were just disengaged. They just showed up, right? They were there, they put in their time, they were meh, they just kind of did their work, but they were there for the weekend, right? Draw the check, go do whatever else. And then there was another third that was actively disengaged. They were either fighting against or undermining or looking for other jobs while they're on the job, all kind of these kind of things. And we realized, man, that was tough when we're looking at driving innovation in a company. And they actually looked at that if you could flip the switch on just moving the disengaged to engaged, I forget, I can give you the real stats, but it was like 4 orders of a magnitude gross GDP that could have been introduced in productivity and value if you could just engage people in work. And they're drawing a paycheck. Well, I stumbled across a similar survey in education about the same time, looking at what happens from 4th grade to seniors in high school. And this was, while I was there doing the consulting. My wife teaches elementary school, and I would go as scientist in the classroom, and I worked with Lego League kids as well as high school kids. And I told my wife, I said, that's something weird happening. I work with your kids in elementary school, and they're curious and they're creative and they're trying anything. And by the time they get to me at high school, their brains have been rewired. I don't know what's actually happening, to the kids. And so this study, and I'll just leave it with this, the disengagement statistic is locked in by the time you leave high school. So at that point, I said, I came back to Holly and I said, Holly, I want to come back to see if we can launch this thing we talked about. We've got to get these kids before they leave high school. We actually got to get them through middle school into this. And so we talked about it. So iSchool, Holly said the state of Tennessee is coming out with this grant opportunity. And so we wrote this synthetic vision of what the future of learning might look like. And the I's in iSchool were around 7 different I's. Part of it had to do with innovation, individuality, continual improvement, things there. But it was a vision of a holistic, integrated school within a school that would set students up for the future of doing anything they wanted to do. The dream were students coming through the pathways, they could leave high school and either start their own business, immediately go into the workforce because they're using real world tools, they're job ready from day one out of high school, or it would launch them into an accelerated pathway into a 4-year college. And they could immediately contribute in graduate level research teams as freshmen. So that was kind of the impetus of iSchool. And then the other thing we were able to do is kind of the cherry on top. As a part of a work-based learning initiative and in collaboration with the state of Tennessee and Rome State, we created Wildcat Manufacturing, which is a student-run enterprise, where the students provide design manufacturing services for local companies and actually beyond, as well as individuals. They do everything from the customer-centered value creation of the ideation all the way through final production and sometime installation, all of the billing, all of the communications, all of the media. They run their own business. And we've been able to allow them to get paid, and I'll put that in parentheses, as part of a profit sharing model, right? Through a number of grants, through Jobs of the Future and other things, so that they're experiencing what really neat, innovative work could look like in the future as a part of that. So that's kind of a nutshell. Is that enough to kind of put a
Yeah, that does it exactly. Two things to follow up on that. How are you sharing the iSchool idea with other schools across the state?
So a couple of things. We've had the opportunity. Wildcat Manufacturing was recognized at the Holly helped me with this. This was
Tennessee
the
School Board Association.
Tennessee School Board Association as a program of excellence.
Yeah.
So we're beginning to connect that. Holly has us connected with a number of networks across the state to share ideas around the things that we're doing there as a part of it. The other thing we're really trying to work on, and this is, I think, where Joe comes in and Holly, with the Oak Ridge Corridor Development Corporation,
Yes.
And these ideas for, whether it's an innovation demonstration center, what we want to be able to do is to provide a framework where teachers can come in and kind of work with us and be trained in kind of the way we're doing things, kind of a train the trainers model. We're not trying to change them. We're just trying to give them the things that we're learning to scale it, to help them take that then and run it inside their schools as a part of that. And that's both the teachers, the trainers, and there's another thread that we may pull back on later on if you'd like. One of these initiatives is beyond the state of Tennessee, but I think it will help us in a replication model with the Catawba Nation. So we have some really great collaborators that are trying to collaborate with us to take what we're going to be doing around the Giants of Oak Ridge, and we'll talk about what that looks like for the future of hybrid manufacturing. Well, they want us, as we develop the curriculum, to do training of their people at the Catawba Nation, both remotely and then hands-on, to basically certify them that they teach, train, and operate the way that we do here. And then they want to make a copy of this on the reservation in Catawba, so that they can then be plugged into a supply chain of suppliers in the maritime, industrial base, or nuclear. Kind of, that's the Wildcat Manufacturing piece, but then be able to train their own people on the reservation for jobs of the future. And this goes everything from digital twins, AI, advanced manufacturing, digital thread, customer discovery, job engagement, all of those kind of things. And we view this as a springboard to do the same thing in Roane County, Anderson County, remote rural areas inside, Nashville, Chattanooga. And the goal, Ray, is not to say we're doing it all right. The goal is, here's a model. Let's work together. Let's learn together how we can accelerate and transform the future of work and the opportunities for these students in emerging technology.
Yeah, and Ray, I'd like to hop in on that real quick. So this framework idea is, I think it's phenomenal, from like no cost to high cost, letting school districts and communities be where they're at. I love the idea that Mark's talking about, being able to personalize it. I've had a chance to live this in real time. So a few years ago, I had a student, I'd started an entrepreneurship class in my very first year of teaching. The pre-internet did not have, I was teaching an economics class. My students hated this. They hated the class. I hated the textbook. I mean, I was a first year teacher trying to figure it out. I figured out worksheet 512 wasn't that exciting for kids. And one day I just came to class and I said, you know what? We're going to take what we're learning here. You're all going to go out to build businesses, and you find what you want to do. And then here's all the structure that an entrepreneur would use to build it. And I got a call a couple of days later from a friend of mine who's a banker, and he's like, he's in a panic. And he's like, Joe, I've got a kid who's 17, who's wanting a $750,000 loan to start a car lot in the community. And I'm like, well, hold on a minute, Ron. This is a school exercise. And he goes, well, I love you, but I can't give him the loan on just because I like you. And I'm like, thank you. That means you're a good banker. And so a few years later, we had the opportunity. I had another kid who was on fire. We sent him out to interview a business leader. He came back. He goes, I now know how to take a kernel of an idea. I know how to take it and get funding on it, and to take it to life, and to really build a business around this. And so I emailed the business owner and said, hey, just want to let you know, this was a great conversation last night. And he goes, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to take this original class and created an entrepreneurship program out of it. And we went out in a day and a half, raised $150,000 of private startup funding. That class is now, I saw yesterday, has grown into 350 high schools across the United States. It probably would have been over 500 had COVID not happened, and they are just going 100 miles an hour. And the kids are so excited because all the stuff that Mark's talking about, you're still teaching the fundamentals. When Holly comes in and she's like, here are the things a program's got to have. This is what she's really good at. Like, here's the standards. This is the way this has got to go. But now sitting down and brainstorming with kids and community and figuring out where you want to go. This next year will be 20 years of that program. And I've watched it grow and kind of taking some of that same principles now and applying it to this innovative work that's Mark's done on the advanced manufacturing side. I really believe we're onto something. And if you've been into Mark's class and see the excitement in these kids, and you also see the level of fidelity of work they do, we bring one of my favorite things to do before we go into Mark's class. I ask, and I'm glad you asked what CTE is because not all of them know. And I talk about, well, okay, it's kind of like an advanced shop class. What do you think it would look like? Well, all of them go back to 1950 and Arthur Fonzarelli and a black jacket and a T-shirt. And they walk out, they're like, holy cow, that's Tony Stark's lab. And to see 14 and 15-year-old kids involved in this, I think it's just incredible. So I think we're really on to building the fundamental framework of this. And the really exciting thing now is watching it start growing out that way. So.
All right. Well, we need to move on to the Giants of Oak Ridge. But I do have a comment, and we can't get into it because we'll use up all of our time, is, all this that you're talking about is amazing. It really is amazing. However, there's one element of the whole process, the whole situation that has to be addressed, and that is these are teenagers who are figuring out who they are. And that's a whole other thing that goes into the process of these programs. You could have the most fantastic advanced programs in the world, but if you're not helping these teenagers learn who they want to be and learn what they are supposed to be about, there's something there that has to be done. And I'm sure you all do a fine job doing that. But that's a whole nother aspect of this whole educational process that comes into play. And it's not insignificant. It really is not insignificant. So anyway, maybe we can have you back and talk about that one day. But let's move on to the Giants of Oak Ridge. About that.
Ray, you want to go ahead?
Just before we do that, very quickly, just to follow up on the iSchool, the innovation idea. The governor has just appointed a person to lead the Office of Innovation for the state of Tennessee. I happen to know him because he is a friend of my oldest son. And I've connected him and I'm arranging for him to come to Oak Ridge. And I think the fact that the governor looks to Oak Ridge as the leader in the nuclear renaissance for not only the state, but for the nation is a key element. You talked about the Oak Ridge Corridor Development Corporation, Mike McGill and Gerald Boyd. I had breakfast with them yesterday. We talked about you, Mark, and all of what you're doing. And we're there's opportunity there. I mean, even Randy Boyd, president of UT, mentioned this concept, this idea as what he called a nuclear academy. And that was over at Knoxville, where we had 1,000 people gathered for the Nuclear Opportunities Workshop. This thing is growing quickly, and you are right in the middle of it. Now, you're using the Giants of Oak Ridge. Your kids are also working on the Scarborough 85 monument. I mean, you're integrated with the things that are happening in the community right now. Scarborough 85, as you know, we just got $3.2 million from the state of Tennessee. That monument is going up, and you're right in the middle of designing that. You see, that's the key concepts. And I think, Keith, what you're talking about these teenagers learning who they are and what they want to be, that real-time engagement in what's going on in Oak Ridge gives them an insight into what is possible. What could they be doing if they chose to? And I think this gives them an esteem, a feeling of success early in their life that will be with them the rest of their life. So with that, let's transition and say, how does Giants of Oak Ridge fit into this whole concept?
In things, Ray, I think to continue that narrative and to tie it to what Keith was talking about, one of the keys for engaging students is doing something that Dan Pink highlighted in his book Drive. It was the curious science behind what really motivates us. We think it's being an influencer. Well, that's because the dopamine hits that have done that, it's not real value, but it's not money, it's not prestige, it's not fame, it's not power. And the reason they know that is they did some really interesting studies around challenging work and hard work. And when that was all that motivated, it actually demotivated because of the fear of loss and risk and everything else. What truly motivates are three things: mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So mastery is the world relevant skills. Autonomy is the freedom to have agency and creativity in how they're learning and how they're applying it. But the real key one, Keith, that you mentioned is purpose. And students in this drive for meaning are looking for purpose in what we're doing, why we're doing it, and where they connect in this world, right? What is their purpose? They might not state it that way, but when they're discovering who they are and what they can do and what they can be. And so a key part of that, Ray, was to connect, I felt, our learning in the classroom with what's happening in the community and what's happening into the future. And so we were talking about the Giants of Oak Ridge. And so I think the first time I ever heard about it may have been with you and Gordon Fee.
That's right.
And we were talking about the desire along Bissell Park and the Wilson Street corridor in Oak Ridge, because we're looking at reimagining that we might have 8 statues or more around very historic, influential, critical people that launched the nuclear history in Oak Ridge and everything around it, because it has been so impactful. And there was talk about, well, we're going to have to raise this much money to build a monument and build a statue and those kind of things. And so we were actually going to the SCORE conference in Nashville. So that's the State Collaborative on Reforming Education, which again pulls all these threads together. And Gordon and I were walking up the sidewalk, and he was talking about that. And I said, hey, Gordon, what if instead of investing in buying those statues, we invest in our future and our kids, and let's buy the equipment and let them learn with cutting edge technology how to make those statues, right? How do we do it? And he goes, well, you can't do that. Can you do that? And so that started this conversation around collaborating with Oak Ridge National Laboratory. They have the most advanced wire arc additive manufacturing platform in the world. Think of it as a 6 degree of freedom robot with a welding tip on the end of it. And they do metal additive 3D printing, state of the art. They won the R&D 100 award last year with it. So I said, it's possible. Think of it as a chocolate bunny, right? We've all seen chocolate bunnies. They're hollow, they're shaped, whatever else, instead of casting. So we can do that, but then we can take advanced machining, multi-axis, and machine the fine detail in it. Because the metal additive, when you're done, it kind of looks like a mud dauber spit out metal to make something, right? It doesn't look like a face. But we can then use state-of-the-art machining technologies, which is used for defense, aerospace, and biomedical, to create the detail of the statues that we need that have the level of fidelity that you can recognize who they are. And then that's kind of cool. That's all right. But you got to realize that almost all of these people we're talking about aren't alive now. So I can't go in and scan the people and get a model. So now we're saying, well, let's take generative artificial intelligence. Let's take advanced AI. Let's take their photographs and let's create a full model with high fidelity of the individuals. And then from that model, we'll slice and then metal 3D print and then machine and then build the life-size statue as we stitch it back together. And we'll have to understand the details involved in making that. We call that a digital thread. right? It's information about the design and how you welded it and how you machined it and what the joints look back. But that is the basically it's the DNA pedigree of how that thing was built. Well, that's an emerging need right now in the advanced nuclear phase, that you can qualify a part just by knowing how it was done and documenting it. So that's really cool. That's a new cutting edge technology that's being integrated. And then we said, well, then why don't we then use generative AI to create a virtual chat bot of the historical people and let people have a conversation with them?
Right.
You know, can you have a conversation with Colonel Nichols and Oppenheimer or Groves? And so we are working with local partners to do exactly that. So the way I like to describe it is eventually we'll come up and you'll scan or you come in proximity. There'll be an augmented reality overlay. Yes, it's Tony Stark kind of technology, but think of Pokemon Go meets Night at the Museum. You'll actually be able to have a conversation. So as a part of all this though, Ray, we got to look at ethical training. You don't want to trick the AI into saying something that it wouldn't say. So there's all of these real world questions that we have to answer as we integrate all of the technology. And so in a nutshell, that's the idea. Let's take emerging cutting edge technology. Let's bring it forward. And what I mean by that is right now it's in labs out there, right? But let's pull it all together and demonstrate innovation with high school community kids and the community and apply it to something that's meaningful to their life and to their future and to jobs of the future. And so that in a nutshell is what we're doing and working with. Now there are lots of partners. We're working with AMZ and Oak Ridge Associated University. We had a summer internship this summer with ORTIC, which is a partnership with Y12 at their facility. The lab now, we're working with their research scientists and we're building a wire arc system about 20 feet outside of where I'm sitting right now. We're really getting very close. And so we're not just going to be doing it out there, we're doing it here, applying world cutting edge technologies to be able to do that. So I'm going to pause and let you dig in, because now there's at least a half a dozen other partnerships that are connecting at this for future opportunities for students, and then also to bring in other programs across the school, right? We're already talking with the digital arts and the ceramics people and say, okay, how can the kids be involved in what we're doing? There's all kinds of neat things there. And that thread also ties back into the Scarborough 85 project, because one of the things that we imagine doing is eventually you're going to have a set of smart glasses and you're going to be able to walk through that park, and in proximity to the statues, they can all come to life and talk to you, both for the history of Oak Ridge, the Scarborough 85. But what we really want to do is to engage the people that interact with that. Is what is your place in this world? Back to your point, Keith, right? What does this technology mean? What does that mean to your future? And what should we do as responsible people and agents in a world that's rapidly changing to provide meaning and do something purposeful? So.
Yeah, and let me add just a bit to that. The conversation you had with Gordon and me, but mostly Gordon, led to the quick understanding of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory that what you had was something that would be a giant leap forward in the high school arena. And so they quickly became a major partner in what you're doing, in that they've helped to fund the equipment needed to do it. And you have to have that. I mean, talking about it's good, but to really produce it, you've got to have this equipment that's capable of doing it. And at the same time, we started talking about the father of Oak Ridge being Major General Nichols. And that became the focus of the first Giants of Oak Ridge, was to create a statue of Major General Nichols. Then we had the USS Houston submarine sale coming available to us. That meant that now got two other statues we need, Rickover and Alvin Weinberg. That would make sense to have those located with that sale. Then here comes the opportunity out at K25, where the interpretive center became finished. And again, Gordon's idea, let's name that the interpretive center for Bill Wilcox. It's happened. We've done it. It's going to open to the public on August the 23rd. And we're going to have, I guess it's going to be the second statue. We moved it up in priority of Bill Wilcox. And I'm telling everyone, Mark, Bill Wilcox is going to talk to you. So there's your challenge. We've got to have that working by the time you get the Bill Wilcox statue out at the Interpretive Center. But things are really coming together nicely. And you're right at the heart of it with this Wildcat manufacturing and the ideas of making it practical, using generative AI, using the other things that are available to us in a creative way that produces something very tangible that people can see and understand and comprehend. And the students who are doing it feel so good about what they're doing. I'm sorry.
And that's okay. And what it's doing is it's training a whole group of students to be more than prepared to be a part of the Manhattan Project too. Yeah. I mean, that's what it's doing. Those are the skills that they learn in Mark's lab are the skills that they're going to need to significantly have an impact on the future of Oak Ridge and the future of the nuclear industry.
Keith mentioned Manhattan Project 2.0. Chris Wright, the energy secretary, when he was in Oak Ridge, challenged Oak Ridge to take the lead in something that he called Manhattan Project 2.0. And what that really means is coming up with the very practical ways to generate enough electrical energy out of nuclear to power all of the artificial data centers that are going to be popping up across the nation. Now, that's one tangible thing. The idea of the manufacturing that Mark's working on fits right into that because the workforce does not exist today to do the things that are going to be needed in Manhattan Project 2.0.
Yeah, Ray, I'll springboard off of that because Chris Wright, who was here and came for a tour and had that quote, shortly after that, Dr. Stephen Streifer gave a talk at ETech.
He did.
And he presented what I call the trifecta. It is that we, solving, as he said, the AI problem and the energy problem are the same problem. Yet at the same time, we have to reestablish our leadership and world, I'm going to say dominance in a good sense in advanced manufacturing. So the trifecta of artificial intelligence, next generation energy through nuclear, and advanced manufacturing in a full stack way is the trifecta to the future that we're talking about for innovation, creativity, of value, livelihood. And so what we're trying to make the case for here, Ray, is the foundation we're laying launches that like no other that we've seen so far. And we're looking for partners to really be able to do that and move it forward. One of the things I had the privilege to communicate when we were talking at ETech is I think everybody on this call, we feel a sense of urgency to move fast, not unresponsibly fast or carelessly fast, but to move fast because our futures and our kids' futures and opportunities are at stake. And I think the other thing we're trying to do as well is we want to be seen as a community that I'm going to borrow a Gretzkyism here. If you guys are familiar with Wayne Gretzky, right? People used to ask him all the time, how are you so good, Wayne? And he said, most of the people that play skate to where the puck is. He said, I skate to where this puck is going to be. I think with the rate of change that we're talking about, we're trying to do the same thing in workforce development, Keith, and learning and responsible use of technologies. We want to say, let's be an experimental model together for how we can transform learning, education, workforce development, and community involvement to where it needs to be for our thriving in the future. And the only way we're going to do that is by working collaboratively, running these experiments, because we don't know what it's going to be, but let's run the experiments quickly and learn fast to be able to do that together as a new model. And I think that, Ray, is where the state comes in, right? The governor, Randy Boyd, the state is looking at how we might do that again. And, what we're trying to do, I think, is right in the heart of that.
I agree. And I think that Office of Innovation will need to come to Oak Ridge quickly. And I'm trying to get him there.
Well, I'd love to. Ray, I feel so blessed. I was at Oak Ridge National Laboratory for 32 years plus. I always used to say it's the best place in the world to work because you literally could go right down the hall and find somebody that was a world expert in any field, bar none. And that if you were humble enough, you could put together a team unlike any of the world. And I knew that we were smarter, better, stronger, faster together than we could ever be apart. And so I've just had the blessed privilege to interact across the world to see some of the best things in creativity and collaboration and the people around this call. And all we're saying is this try to connect that and to do something that's really, really purposeful and really important together to be able to do that.
And Mark, I think you have done that, and I'm excited to watch what's going to be happening in the future. Keith,
Well,
don't you? We've got some very exciting things coming.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and we appreciate y'all being with us this morning. We really do.
Thanks for having us.
We'll come back to this again for an update when y'all are ready to give us an update on.
When we get the first statue, we probably ought to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, very good. All right, folks, thanks for watching. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another Hidden History.